everyone. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, well, I mean, I just said that because that's what you always say, but it's been kind of a hectic day. It started with, I got a meeting scheduled yesterday for some clients that needed to do a personal guarantee for some real estate transaction, and they required color copies of the ID. This mortgage provider requires color copies. I only have a black and white printer. And so I figured, and I don't have a flatbed scanner either. And so I figured, I guess it's time. So the day started with Esther going to get a printer. It wasn't me, I came to work, but she bought a printer from Staples, dropped like $1,000 on this printer and extra toner for this one small meeting. And but good news, the flatbed scanner / color copier works very well, and it did its job that it was needed to do.
Excellent. Well, congratulations. That's good.
Yeah. Big new piece of office equipment added to the office.
Big news over there.
Yeah.
I'm a bit amazed that they would require a physical, like, color copy of an ID. Why can't you take a picture and send it to them encrypted or something like that?
Yeah. Good question, Kim.
So many rules.
I mean, it may be possible. I wasn't running the real estate transaction. And so the instructions I received from the other law firm was that's what they wanted. So I will comply. It is handy having a color printer and having a flatbed scanner. So I knew I wanted it. I just put it off for a couple of years and it's time.
Yeah, there are occasional times that you need those things, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we should do the intros. I'm your host, Heather Malarick of Merrick Law. I'm joined today by Evan Clark of Kahane Law. Evan, you're our guest today too, which is really exciting. And we also have our special guest, Kim McDonald of McDonald Advisory. Kim's a financial advisor and insurance advisor with Raymond James Limited. How are you, Kim?
Oh, I'm doing great. We're riding the high for people tuning in today. This is the episode just after our very first Access to Justice Christmas party, and lots of people came out. I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about it, but it seemed like there was just an amazing group of professionals who came out and celebrated their time that they donated to our podcast last year. And yeah, it was just a whole pile of fun, which is nice to see people.
I thought it was a really grand time. I had a lot of fun and a lot of great conversations. I've discovered that Ms. McDonald is, in addition to her many other credentials, is a hostess with the mostest. In addition to taking care of the catering, she also made her own appetizers, set up a variety of drink stations. It was a decorations, music. I mean, it was very impressive. And Evan also premiered our trailer, and it was incredible and very fun. And hopefully listeners can check that out soon on the website or on the socials somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And thanks to Raymond James for hosting as well. That was very lovely and kind and generous.
Yeah, it was. And the thing is, it's not just that Kim prepared some appetizers. She prepared the best appetizer there. Like, hands down.
It was a standout. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, oh, this is really good. Like, I think it was one of the first things I ate. I'm like, oh, this looks okay. And then I ate it and I was like, oh my gosh.
You guys are being kind. It's not hard to do appetizers better than like a mass catering company, isn't it? I think all of us could prepare better appetizers than a catering company that provides like a massive amount of appetizers daily.
What I'm hearing is your bar is pretty high that you expect yourself to hit. And so it's like nothing for you. But for us putting the things in our mouths, it was like, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, I thought it was objectively good, not just good in comparison with other things. It was delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe we need to start posting recipes. I love cooking and eating. So for those who are really dying of curiosity, what was it, like a broiled pancetta?
Yes.
Kim, is that?
I'll tell you exactly what it was very
Okay.
quickly. So you go to the Italian Center for all ingredients. First, go to the meat counter, request the circular round of pancetta, sliced, not too thin, but thin enough that you can, it almost looks like a cracker. And then you put that in the oven and crisp it all up till it gets kind of hard like a cracker. The second item you need to acquire at the Italian Center is in the dried goods section. You're going to look for dried figs. You're going to pour sambuca all over them and have them marinate overnight so they soften up. And then the other two items are goat cheese and thyme. So essentially you just have the pancetta that's already been crisped up, pop some goat cheese or smear it all on there, chop up some of your figs, sprinkle them on, and a little bit of thyme on top. And it turns out absolutely delicious.
Yeah, it was really amazing. It was really amazing. Pancetta is like a bacony ham kind of product, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a pork product, and it's taken from the same place as a bacon, which is the belly. It's just thicker cut. And I don't know if that was thick enough for me to call it pancetta or pancetta or however they say it. But Kim just told us what it was. So that's what you ask for at the Italian Center to get it. But it was not that thick. So, because when I think pancetta, I'm thinking like something that's like an inch and a half thick. But these were like small, these were thin, these were like thick bacon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just want them thick enough so they don't, like, the constitution stays intact when you put a couple things on top. But otherwise, they should be fairly thin. You can request about 15 slices for your sheet pan, and you should be good to go.
Yeah, I gotta love an appetizer where you only have to go to one store too, because that's a thing sometimes when you're going to 3 or 4 different places for ingredients. Nobody wants to do that. No,
I don't.
All right, folks, I am excited to pick Evan's brain today in this area of law because I don't know anything about it really. I feel like it maybe has to do with contracts a little bit, but I don't even know if that's the case. Evan, I think we're going to talk to you today about entertainment law. Is that right?
That is correct.
Does it have anything to do with contracts?
Yeah, yes, of course. There are definitely contracts in the entertainment law industry. But what we're going to focus on today is more just kind of one of the common questions that I get a lot from people that are looking for this type of advice, which isn't that much here in Edmonton, but hopefully they can find this and then they don't even need to call me and ask, because we're going to do it right now, which is like, okay, I wrote a song or I recorded a song and now I'm worried about my rights, protecting my rights to that piece of intellectual property. And in Canada, we have very specific rules about that the bundle of rights that go along with that type of intellectual property. So instead of using kind of abstract terms like intellectual property to like make myself feel smart, if you write a song, or if you record a song, or if you're playing an instrument in a song that gets recorded, you can have the right to be paid money if people use that recording or if people use that song. And so I want to kind of demystify that as best I can. I hope I'm able to do that and make it sound relatively simple and straightforward.
Okay.
Because it's pretty confusing. It can be pretty confusing. So,
well, yeah, I'm imagining, first of all, like property rights. I'm imagining owning a house or a baseball bat or I don't know what, any sort of object, right? Something that's tangible, but they use it intellectual property. So I'm assuming there's some overlap there that you can own something that's not tangible, but this is a whole other class of things to own. Is that right?
yeah. And I'm really mad at myself right now because I know that I just, like, when I told you, hey, let's do this topic, I had just finished researching all this and getting it all straight and writing it down somewhere. And I don't know where I wrote it down, what I wrote it down for, what I was producing to do this, because I can't think of a file where I did this, but it was recently. So, yeah, so I've got it relatively straight in my mind, but it's so confusing. Like, let me put it into context for you. I am interested in this space, and I've written music, and so I've been aware of of these issues, and been like researching it and stuff for a number of years. And I also took a class in law school called Musicians in the Law that also went into details. And I'm telling you, it is confusing, that I always forget exactly how it is. And I always have to like look it up to try and get it all straight because it's crazy.
So is this the Copyright Act that people should be looking up if they're starting to investigate this? Where's the first stop on the knowledge train?
Right here. This is the first stop.
What's the second stop?
There are a few good places out there that I've found. So CD Baby publishes some good stuff. They're generally American, but it's still relatively helpful. And I found another website when I was, I don't even, like, maybe I dreamed that this happened because I seriously cannot nail down what exactly I was doing. But I found a really good website that really did a pretty good job of breaking it down. And I will try to find it so that we could include that among things to include in our show notes here for people so they can go and click and find out.
When I was doing my research for this episode, I stumbled upon a website from a lawyer out east. His website was themusiclawyer.ca, and he talked about what I thought was kind of interesting. I thought this was going to be an uninteresting episode, but his history was interesting on the evolution of copyright or IP law in the music industry. And it started out with regards to publishing books, and everybody was an author and trying to protect their books from being printed multiple times and not getting credit for it. So today it sounds like music law also refers to authors because they haven't really updated the laws for the music industry, and it still dates back to when these laws were created for books. I thought that was really, really interesting. And then it kind of evolved to protecting sheet music. And then as the music industry evolved to recordings and publishing and songwriting and all this stuff, I just thought, like, wow, like they really need to advance this area because there's so much evolution that's been happening.
Oh my gosh, you know what? I just remembered what it was for. So it's funny because now I'm going to reveal myself a little bit. I found the website that I was looking at when I was doing this, and what I was doing was writing a web page for the Kahane Law Office website. So I'm not going to reveal myself. I will provide the link to that web page when we publish it, and by the time this gets published, we'll have that web page. So you'll be able to link to that and kind of go through. Okay, good. I'm so glad I remember that. Now, because now I was able to pull it up, so now I've got it. I've got an aide de memoire that's going to help me make sure we keep this clean. So there's basically two roles I want to say, we'll call them roles that get rights to a song. The first one is what Kim said, the author, the songwriter.
Okay.
And the songwriter's bundle of rights that they get and ability to collect royalties is the most significant one. And often they will give up those rights, part of them. The person that writes the song will usually give up some or all of those rights. Like the Beatles gave up all of their songwriting rights, gave them to their publisher. Then Michael Jackson bought them later.
Right.
Paul McCartney doesn't own the rights to Hey Jude. And he's never, as far as I'm aware, he's never even bought them back because now they're like so expensive. He's like, couldn't be bothered. They learned a hard lesson. Like they got screwed on the business side. If you didn't know that, it's pretty common knowledge that the Beatles got screwed. Anyways. So the
I feel like
songwriter,
he's doing okay though, right? Like
Macca? Yeah, Macca's fine. Come on.
Yeah, like we don't need to do a GoFundMe or anything for him. He's okay.
Sir Paul McCartney, I think he's fine.
Okay, good.
Yoko, though, could be really a lot more rich than she is. I'm saying. Anyways, so the way that they usually give up a lot of those rights is by signing a contract with a publishing house or a publisher. So when you hear the term publisher, or you're talking about publishers getting royalties, that can be confusing because you can think like, oh, a publisher gets rights. A publisher does not get rights. A publisher gets a piece of the songwriting royalties. They get some of the rights of the songwriter, and usually it'll be some percentage. It'll be like, a 50-50 split or whatever. So those are the songwriter copyrights.
Sorry, just to clarify that. So you could sell just half of your songwriting, assign half of your songwriting rights to a publisher and keep half. So
yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
And those rights exist the moment you create the work, and they call them works. The moment you create the work, you own the rights to that work.
Okay.
Now, it can be difficult to prove that sometimes. And so, we get these lawsuits about like Stairway to Heaven. There was a big lawsuit about Stairway to Heaven. I think Led Zeppelin won in the end. But, and then the question comes like, okay, like, did you write it or did you steal it from somebody else's original work? And I don't know all of that, all of like the thresholds and the standards that they use in different jurisdictions to like decide those types of cases.
Right.
But for the United States, and this is an important nugget because, there's such a huge market for the music industry, and up here in Canada, often you'll have your stuff in the United States as well. For the United States, if you register your work under whatever their Copyright Act is called, then it goes a lot better for you if you have to litigate. There's presumptions in your favor. So in Canada, there's not the same kind of incentive to register your copyright. You don't have to register it. And whether or not you register it, even in the US, whether or not you register it doesn't change the fact that you own it. So if you write a song, that's your song. You own it. You own the rights to it. You don't have to register it with anybody. Registering it is helpful as a piece of evidence. It's not determinative, but it can be helpful.
Gotcha.
Like if you wrote a song, Heather, in 1995, in the throes of your early life, and you registered it in 1995, and then Ed Sheeran wrote basically the same song. Very suspiciously sounds just like your song you wrote in 95. Yeah. And he registers his copyright and it's like 2018. It doesn't matter if he independently thought of exactly the same song. You thought of it first, it's yours. You win.
I see. Okay.
So that would be pretty compelling, right? Because I don't even know if Ed Sheeran was alive in 1995.
Okay, well, we don't need to rub that in, but okay.
I was alive in 1995.
And
anyways.
presumably it works the other way as well. So if I registered in 1995, but Kim came along and had a video of her playing the song in her basement in 1990 or something, then...
Well, it gets kind of tricky, Heather, because the date you register it doesn't, like, can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I mean about it's not necessarily determinative. And I don't want to speak too much about this because, like, I do not do litigation about songwriting. So
Yeah.
I'm not the best one, but the
Fair
way
enough.
that I understand it is,
Mm-hmm.
like, I could right now go on, register my work, because none of my works are registered. So I could go register my works. I wrote some of them in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But I would register them. If I registered them, it would be registering them now in 2022.
Right.
But, I wrote it a long time ago. So, yeah, anyways, that's what the registry is there, just to be helpful, but it's, a lot of people don't register their works. Okay.
It's kind of blowing my mind, actually, because it's like, there's so many different kinds of art as well. So there's like a song which can be reproduced, and it can be not only like that instance of it being played, but it can also be replayed by someone else or sung by someone else. Books can be reproduced, but there's one-of-a-kind pieces of art. Anyway, wow, my brain is really, there's a lot of stuff going on here that is possible. We're really scratching the surface.
We're not getting into books.
We're not going to get into that. Yeah.
Music.
Okay.
And that's confusing enough.
Yes. Okay. So we have the author role. That's the person who
Songwriter.
writes.
Yeah, let's call him a songwriter.
The songwriter.
And
okay.
obviously, songwriting is the musical composition and the lyrics, if any. Right. And so that's, yeah. So there's lots of ways you can split that up, and like there's no set rules about that. It's when a work is created, there's this bundle of rights that attach to that work, and the person that owns the work, that created the work, owns the work. And if multiple people created it, then it's going to be most clear if they have a contractual relationship saying who owns what. Okay, so there's songwriter.
Oh, wait. I've got a point on that. Is it important then to avoid fights in the future, like a divorce in music? Is it important then if you are creating music with a band or a group of people, like let's say you've got a garage band, you're a bunch of 17-year-old kids, you create this like banger and you don't, claim your piece of that song. Is that a big mistake that parents are making, not bringing their kids to a lawyer and saying, hey, can we talk about this?
Well, I don't know that a lawyer needs to be involved per se, Kim, but yes. If you participate in creating a song, you should get something in writing, just to be clear. And it's best if you do that, if you establish that beforehand to the extent that it's possible. These types of things, it's better to have things clear. And so if you're in a band, you guys should negotiate songwriting credits. Like, for example, there's two bands that I like a lot that I think are good examples of ways to deal with this. U2 and the Smashing Pumpkins. The Smashing Pumpkins, who are having this revival right now, part of what, I wasn't in the band, okay, but what I understand from reading interviews and such, part of what like destroyed that band, besides drug use, was songwriting credits. So Billy Corgan wrote all the songs, kept all the songwriting rights, copyrights, and made a ton of money the other band members did not make. So there's this great inequality as far as getting paid. Now they had rights too because they performed on the records, and we'll get to that next. But Billy Corgan made a lot more money than his bandmates, and I think that's part of the thing. That's one of like the things that stirred up jealousy, and they had all kinds of issues. It's not that simple, but that didn't help. That does not help band morale when lead singer is getting paid millions on this hit song and you're making thousands when you go on tour.
So what could kids do to protect themselves if they don't have the money to go to a lawyer? Do they write scribble on a piece of paper what they've done and sign it? Do they video themselves working on songs or performing those songs? What's some little things that people can do that might help them in the future?
Anything in writing is going to be better than nothing, Kim, but like the devil's in the details. Like if you're going to write a contract, there's certain things that need to happen in order for that to be a contract. And so I don't really want to get into details about contract law here per se. It's a bit of a sidetrack, but you got to make sure that it is actually a legally binding contract. And just because it's written down doesn't make it a contract. In fact, it doesn't need to be written down in order for it to be a contract. Verbal contracts are still contracts. There's other elements that make it a contract. So you have to be, well, I guess I am going to talk a little bit about contracts. You have to be, the parties have to be ad idem, which if I remember law school Latin properly, it's when that you're of the same mind. In other words, you come to there's a meeting of the minds. You agree on what it is that you're agreeing on. There has to be consideration, which usually is in the form of some kind of compensation. Somebody is giving up something, and it makes sense with the rights that the other person is getting, or the rights that person is getting if they're giving something up. So there has to be some kind of consideration, and that doesn't have to be money, right? In songwriting contract, it could be whatever. You're giving up the opportunity to take all of the royalties, but in return, you're getting help writing the song. And so as long as that's worded properly, that could be valid consideration, I would think. So obviously having it in writing really can help to indicate that the parties are on the same page, pun intended.
And do they have to write it out in handwriting? Can it be typed out and signed?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
Like I said, it can be verbal. It's still binding. Writing is better because it's easier then for everyone to point at this document and say, here's what we wanted. But, lawyers are better at this kind of thing because, we see contracts. So we we've got the writing locked down in a way that you probably don't if you're just thinking it up off the top of your head.
So I have a question for you, just kind of following up on the Smashing Pumpkins example and knowing that you've sort of...
I didn't say the other band.
Oh, right.
U2. I didn't get into that one, but we'll get to that. Don't let me forget. Okay.
We can come back to that.
Heather, go.
I'm not going to talk about my personal experience of hanging around with bands and garages when I was a young person, but I don't recall anyone ever talking about any sort of songwriting ownership or anything. So is this something that as a band, people do discuss as they're writing songs and working on things?
Well,
once they sort of hit a certain level, or when they're putting together, what do they even call them? I don't even know the albums anymore. I don't know. I'm so out of the loop.
Good question. I didn't know you were hanging out with Nickelback back in the day. But they're not your speed. They're an Edmonton band originally. Anyways. I think there's a change. I think things have changed because when I was writing songs as a teenager in the 90s, it was so hard to record those songs. It was really hard. You had to pay a bunch of money to go to some crappy studio. So to get into a nice studio, it was really expensive. It was quite prohibitive to create and produce your own music. Now it's like so easy.
Right.
It's the technology, the digital technology has transformed that industry in such a way that anybody can create high quality, as far as the audio goes, music. That was not possible in the 90s. It was really hard to do that and expensive. So, and all the specialized equipment that was difficult to use and to know, it's just so much easier now. And I think that has contributed to musicians being more business savvy. It's uncool to talk about the business side of music. I think that was kind of the attitude of some bands and things. Now, keep in mind, 50% of zero is still zero. So,
right.
And what I mean by that is I've been paid about $50 total in royalties for my music. And I have a lot of songs and they've been available for a long time.
Right.
And I think they're pretty good. But it's to like make some serious money. So where it would actually matter, whatever agreement you might have, most of the time doesn't materialize. And so the band practicing in the garage might not want to get hung up on that, but it's something to be aware of. Like, if you're serious about music, you can make a living at it. There's tools out there that can help you be successful. Anybody, without touring, with touring, tools for all that, to be an independent musician now and to have a legitimate business. So I think if you are an independent musician, what I mean by that is you're not hired by one of the major labels, or any label, I guess, then yeah, you should be thinking about this stuff so that you're kind of set up properly, so that if you're not making that much money, at least you know where that money's going properly.
So I think what I'm kind of gleaning from that is, like, if you're just playing guitar in the garage with your buddies, this isn't probably something to get worked up about. But if you start booking gigs and you're starting to make some money and maybe staring down the brink of being successful, that might be the time to put some time and attention towards these things and maybe start getting some of it written down or some agreements or discussions in place. Is that
how people market things to lawyers, and if it's marketed to lawyers, it's always more expensive. There's a lot of people out there preying on musicians, because like there's all this emotion caught up in being a musician, and so they'll prey on your dreams and basically, and there's lots of people willing to make money off of you when you're not even making music that's any good. So I would say beware of paying for services, but I don't want to be one of those people contributing to that where like, oh yeah, like if you're a musician, you need to go see a lawyer. Because I don't think that's true most of the time. Unfortunately, you're probably not going to make any money, especially in Canada. But if it is something you're serious about and you're going to start a business, if you're going to be a musician and you're going to make money, that's a business, then you should get your ducks in a row and you should get a lawyer and sort that stuff out. And the sooner the better, right? The sooner you have that songwriting stuff sorted out, the better. Then it's not an issue moving forward. If you already have a song out there, so it's so easy to release a song now, Heather. Like you can write a song, you can record it, and it can be on Spotify in days, right? That whole process can take like days, and now it's released out there to the world and anyone can stream it. And so if you have, it's theoretically possible you get a fluke and the song's like super good and just gets picked up by the algorithm and ends up on people's Discover Weekly or whatever on Spotify, and then they really love it. And theoretically something like this could happen to somebody that nobody knows about. And all of a sudden there could be a bunch of revenue coming in for that. And so if that's a bad time to figure it out, is all I'm saying. So that's a really long way to say, within reason, figure it out sooner rather than later, but don't break the bank.
Right.
To do it.
Right.
Okay.
U2. Oh, right. U2. Yes.
U2 decided very early on that they were just going to have every member of the band was getting a quarter of the songwriting credits, period. Didn't matter who wrote it. They were just going to split them 4 ways. U2 has never come close to breaking up as far as we're really aware. I mean, maybe after Rattle and Hum before Octoon Baby, perhaps. And then, Adam was an alcoholic. Well, I guess he's still an alcoholic, but he was in pretty rough shape in the early 90s. Like maybe those few things, but not really. The band really stuck together. And I think they attribute it to at least partly to that. Like that's their mentality, that we are a band. Everyone's equally contributes, though differently, kind of like Access to Justice, as a team. And they weren't going to just give Bono and the Edge all the money for the songwriting. They all share it equally. So, I think and I wouldn't be surprised if right now Billy Corgan is sharing those songwriting credits with the other band members a little more liberally than he did in the 90s. I think he's learned his lesson. That may have made him a lot of money, but wrecked the band.
Is he also running a tea shop or a donut?
Yeah, Madame Zuzu's.
It's a tea shop? Yeah, okay.
Tea shop, yeah. He's doing this podcast right now. Very interesting because I think it's a really interesting model, and it's on topic for this. It's a really interesting model for musicians. Like, he does, each episode is a song on this new album. He's doing this concept album that is really a continuation of Melancholy and Infinite Sadness and Machina. Those two were concept albums that nobody knew they were concept albums because they didn't tell anybody and didn't tell anyone what the backstory was. And so now this new album is like a continuation. It's like part 3 of this arc, I guess. And it's kind of crazy and not at all what I would have expected from him. And every episode he gives like the backstory of like this, where this music comes from. And it's like kind of like a rock opera. It's not a rock opera, but like he's got a whole story behind all these songs. And it's interesting. Like, I'm not really enjoying the new album. I'm not really loving the new songs, but it's an interesting way to get the art out there. Yeah. Okay, did you have another question? Because I wanted to get into what this means, like how this translates into dollars in the bank account. But if you had another question, we can do that first.
No, I just wanted to scoop up what role number 2 was. So we have author/songwriter is role number 1. What's role number 2 that gives you rights to a song or a work?
I'm going to say there's actually 3 roles. I'm going to contradict myself. I said 2, but there's really 3 because number 2 is performer rights, specifically performance on a recording. There are rights associated with that. So anyone who performs on a recording, there are royalties for that. And the other one is the master owner, and master is just referring to the olden days when you created a master that was used to stamp vinyl and then later duplicate onto tapes and CDs. So the person that owns the sound recording. And so those could there could be a whole bunch of different people lumped into those 3 roles. There could be tons.
Right.
But, for me, I own all of those things and I still only made about $50 so far.
Okay.
Yeah,
author, performer, and master, and yeah. Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about how people get paid in those different things. So the songwriter copyrights are the most expansive. You get the most opportunity to make money from that because first you get public performance royalties. Public performance royalties is anytime a song that you write is performed in public. So it can be performed by the recording being played. It can be performed by you performing it at a pub or wherever. And it can be performed by a cover band, somebody covering your song. Any of those would get you a royalty for being the songwriter. And the way that happens is the venue is responsible. So the venue where that is played, generally speaking, it might be different if like the venue is like Rogers Place or something. I don't know about that. But if the venue's like a bar, that venue pays performance royalties to SOCAN. SOCAN this is an important thing to bring up now. SOCAN is a performance rights organization in Canada. Or PRO. They are the performance rights organization for songwriters, SOCAN, which stands for the Society of Composers, Authors, and Music Publishers of Canada. SOCAN. So, SOCAN, basically you register your work with SOCAN, and when a song gets played somewhere by somebody, whether it's a radio station or a bar playing it on their own or whatever, they're supposed to report that they played that song to SOCAN, and they have to pay, and they pay, I think you can get like, they have different programs where you can just pay a flat fee to SOCAN every month for just playing songs through your business hours. And then you just, as you tell them what you play, then they pay royalties.
How does karaoke fit into that, and TV programs where people are doing cover songs like America's Talent?
Yeah, great questions, Kim, because it does get, like, you can see how it can get quite complicated pretty quickly. So for songwriter royalties, when it's somebody else is going to record your song, so this would be karaoke. So somebody else is recording the song and they're not recording the lead vocal. Anytime somebody records the song, they have to pay a mechanical royalty to the songwriter. It's called a mechanical royalty because it used to be like the act of putting that song on a mechanical medium, like a record or an 8-track or whatever. Now that it's the amount of royalty that's paid for each reproduction set out in the Copyright Act and regulations, and that is not administered by SOCAN. Mechanical royalties are administered by the Canadian Musical Reproduction Rights Agency Limited, or CIMRA. So they're the pro that collects the royalties on behalf of the songwriter, mechanical royalties. And CIMRA comes up later too. They do other things too. SOCAN collects most of the royalties, but not mechanical royalties for songwriters. The other one you said was, okay, what about like on a video? That's called sync licensing. Again, the songwriter, anytime their song, whether it's performed by them or somebody else, anytime their song appears on a video of some kind, whether that's a movie or a TV show or YouTube or whatever, they have an entitlement to be compensated for that. You can't do it without their permission. But that is not covered by the Copyright Act. So it's negotiated like each time. There's a whole cottage industry about sync licensing.
This answers a question maybe that I had for you then. I wanted you to get through them all. I just recently watched a documentary about Sinead O'Connor. And of course, Prince wrote her hit song, Nothing Compares to You. But they played a whole bunch of her songs, but they didn't play that one. And they said that the Prince estate wouldn't give permission for them to play the song. And I was left with this question. I thought, how can that be? Because she performed that song. Like, I get that he wrote it, but doesn't she own her performance of that song and can't give permission to play it in her own documentary? So maybe you can, I don't know if you can answer that question.
I can. So, I mean, I don't know specifically for that song, but we know for sure Sinead O'Connor performed on that recording. And so as a performer, at least, she would have had rights. She may have signed those rights away to the record label or not. She may have kept those rights, but she would be entitled to royalties anytime that recording is played. But she does not own the songwriting. She didn't, unless Prince gave her some of the songwriting rights. She never got the songwriting rights. Prince kept those. So he owns the songwriting rights, and the songwriter alone is the one who gets compensated for sync licensing when a song is synced with video. That's why we call it sync license. It's like you're syncing it with a video. And she may not even one
who can give permission then as well. I'm assuming then. Yeah. Okay.
The person that owns the recording doesn't even get a say or get compensated.
Could she have performed the song on the documentary? No, I guess not, because that's in the song and it's on a video. And
That's right. If it's synced to video, the songwriter has to give permission. And it's a one-off thing. There's no like set thing. But like I said, there's a cottage industry. So there are a bunch of agencies that collect libraries of songs, and they sign contracts where they're taking they're taking nothing from the songwriter as far as rights. They're not taking 0%. Then they're doing it on like a monthly fee basis where like you can pay them X per month and they'll shop your catalog around.
okay.
That's not a great deal if you don't have a catalog that anybody knows about, because where's their incentive to get your songs placed?
Right.
And then you're just paying them money.
But Prince's
So
probably pretty well.
Prince is different, right? Like all the known ones is going to be different, but there are a lot of agencies out there that have catalogs and have a piece of those songwriting publishing rights. And then they would go and negotiate on behalf of the artist to get a song placed for the songwriter, and then negotiate that fee and pay the songwriter like most of it, and they take a cut. That's usually how that kind of works. So there's a whole industry about that. So people that are making videos want to use music, and they know they can't just use any music because they would be infringing on copyright. That's why you get videos taken down from YouTube. It's also why, if people have negotiated with YouTube, it's also why not everyone, that doesn't happen very much anymore just for songs, unless it is somebody like Prince that doesn't have an agreement with YouTube. I have an agreement with YouTube. Anyone can use my song on YouTube and they'll get charged. So any advertising revenue that's on there, that's because of ads being played before their video or whatever, I would get a piece of that, because it's just been negotiated, and it's like, my music isn't worth a ton of money. So I'm okay with like taking a few pennies or whatever it is anytime somebody uses my song in a video and it gets streamed. And they have technology to like basically takes the distinct signature of your song, and they can, artificial intelligence finds any video that's playing your song. So I've put videos. So for example, my song is our lead-in. And a different song is the outgoing. Anytime somebody plays one of these songs, I get royalties. Anytime somebody plays one of our videos, I get royalties for that. Both those songs.
Heather and I are not paying you for the song at this moment. And you won't have to.
Do we get co-songwriter credit though? I think we have to have a negotiation after this episode. I think we're gonna have to.
It's all from ad revenue from YouTube. That's how they deal with it. Because they had an issue. They had a crisis because they were like faced with, what do we do? And then like, if you played a cover of a song, that also would give rise to the songwriter has rights to that,
right,
and should get reimbursed for that and should get paid for it. Okay, so you kind of aren't right for like the more complicated ones right off the bat, but that's okay.
Sorry.
What were you gonna ask?
Kind of plucking the ones that I've seen recently out of the air.
There's all these songs that you hear over and over again on TikTok. So would the owner of that song sell it to an agency and then collect money that way? Is that what you were describing before?
That's also a good question. It kind of goes along with streaming, but you're right, it's different because it's not quite streaming. It is being synced to video. And so, basically TikTok would have negotiated with people that own libraries of songs, and those are the songs that are made available on TikTok to use. You can't just use any song on TikTok. It has to be in the library. So to give you an idea of how that works for somebody like me who just does music as a hobby and kind of throws it out there, there's a lot of companies out there that will publish your music for you without taking a big chunk of your songwriting credits. And sometimes they won't take any chunk. They'll just charge you for doing it and won't take any of the rights. And so I've used CD Baby, for example. They're really good. They're probably the most robust in their administration of rights in favor of the artist. Like they take care of YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, as well as all of the streaming services you could ever think of. There's tons of streaming services I've never even heard of that any one I've done through CD Baby, they administer it and collect royalties from those. So that's how you do it. Like, I'm not negotiating directly with YouTube or any of these people. It's done through the agency that basically sell as a service the ability to publish through them. Ingrid Michaelson uses CD Baby. If you've heard of Ingrid Michaelson, she's one of their poster children's. You've never heard of Ingrid Michaelson?
No.
Heather, wow.
I don't. Is it TikTok related? I'm not a.
No, she's an independent artist.
Oh.
That's quite famous. So, like, have you heard of, do you know who Jason Mraz is? Kim's nodding at all the Sarah Bareilles.
They're like easy listening kind of music.
Yeah, they're artists that my wife loves. All three of those she's big fans of, especially Sarah Bareilles. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Regardless. So, okay. So, songwriter has all these rights. They get public performance royalties anytime somebody performs their song publicly, whether that's from a recording or doing it live. They get mechanical royalties anytime somebody records that song and releases it as an MP3 or a CD or whatever. And the way that usually has happened, the way that it's usually done. Yes, Heather?
Does a songwriter have to give permission for someone to record their song?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, not really, but to release the recording and to let anybody hear the recording, yes, you've got to get permission. And so the way that usually happens, like,
and you have to pay. So I couldn't record Nothing Compares to You and release it. I would have to get permission from the Prince estate.
yeah, but the way that happens is different, because if you remember, I said mechanical royalties they're handled by, like, those are already contemplated in the Act in Canada and the US.
Okay.
And so then it's just a matter of making sure that the person gets paid. And so the way that usually works, like, I released a cover of a old Springfield Buffalo song. And so I paid X dollars to an agency that there's a few agencies that kind of handle this on behalf of people. So whoever holds those rights, usually it's a publishing company, but it could be like the estate. It might be more difficult. Prince's estate may grip that tightly and it may be impossible to get, but most of the time it's not that hard. It's really like an administrative exercise. And you would pay X, and that would give you the rights to 500 instances, right? So, like, if you're going to press 500 CDs and sell those, then that would be the fee. You'd pay some fee, and it's like pennies or a fraction of that. I can't remember what it is. But it's set out by law. It's X per instance for a given song. And so if you're going to press like 100,000 of those, that adds up, of course. And it doesn't matter if you sell them or not. You have to pay that royalty up front when you produce the copy. And that applies to MP3s as well, but that's a little bit more difficult because if you're selling MP3s on like Apple Music. And if you're streaming as well, I'm pretty sure there's mechanical royalties even for streaming. At least there was when I purchased for this song, but it's a lot less per stream. So those count for all of that. The mechanical royalties have to be paid for all that, or you're doing it in an unauthorized way. And so when you're releasing it with somebody, who's not like a record label and not taking care of all this stuff for you. So you're doing it through CD Baby or you're doing it through whoever. You have to take care of that and provide them with proof that you've done that. And then before they'll put it out, because otherwise they can be liable for infringing on that copyright. Okay, and we already talked about sync licensing. And then making available rights is one way to talk about the streaming rights. So it's a little bit different than mechanicals. I kind of lumped it in together because I think they're dealt with kind of in the same way using the same agencies. But these are not, the making available rights generally are not, the statute hasn't caught up with the reality of technology yet. And so being able to stream it whenever you want on Spotify, it hasn't been dealt with. And so there's kind of these one-off, and different streaming platforms pay different amounts. And there's large publishers, right? Like Warner Brothers will have their publishing arm that owns like a huge catalog. And so they can negotiate and have negotiated a particular rate for their library that obviously Apple and Spotify and whoever else want. And so they'll pay that higher amount. So that's the making available rights. So those are the songwriter rights and the ways that they would get paid. So there's no set statutory body that collects royalties for making available rights or sync licensing, or but there are for mechanical royalties and public performance royalties. It's SOCAN for public performance, and it's SIMRA for mechanical royalties.
Okay.
But sync licensing and making available rights are usually going to be taken care of by whoever you have that's helping you publish, whether that's an actual publishing company, which also would then take a percentage of your songwriting credits, or another company that offers that as a service and you pay for that service upfront. Any other questions about songwriter, specifically royalties?
So there's an evolution that we've been part of because we're old. So Napster was the original place where I think we were taking music from, and it sort of evolved over different channels over time. For people like me who are not, integrated in the music community very much, I've heard of bands not wanting to be on those streaming services because they don't get paid enough to do it. And I'm wondering if that is because of the negotiations haven't gone well for royalties. Why wouldn't they want to be out there? Because where else would they be? I'm just wondering what your take is on that, Evan, and where most bands have settled.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I didn't understand this. I didn't grasp this fully until, at first. And I, in fact, have like a YouTube video out there where I'm like ranting about the low royalties. But the reason, what I misunderstood and what bands are misunderstanding when they're taking that stance, certainly it's not a lot of money. It's pennies or fractions of a penny per stream. But that is more like a radio play than buying a CD. And so if they're comparing it to royalties you get if you sold a CD, which are quite high. Like if you sell a physical medium thing, it's costing between 10 and 20 or 20 bucks or more. And the artist would be getting probably in the realm of 60% or more of that, depending on what kind of deal they have with the distributor and their record label and stuff. They're getting a chunk of money from that. And so they're making good money, but they don't get paid every time you play the song once you buy the medium, right? So that's the trade-off.
Right.
So if you think about, like, I bought, the album War by U2, and it cost me, U2 CDs were really expensive. I don't know if you remember that, but their CDs were always 20 bucks. Anyways, so I paid 20 bucks for it. I've listened to those songs so many times. I guarantee you it's like such a small fraction of a penny per listen for those songs. But I mean, now they get more because now I'm paying for Spotify, and they get, anytime I listen to those songs, they get another fraction of a penny. So it's the right way to look at it, Kim, I think, is to compare it more to if you're comparing to album sales, it's like the lifetime of listens you get, there's no ceiling, right? Where on album sales, there is a ceiling. You sell it once. And radio plays did not pay that much in royalties per play. So you're not getting a ton. Whereas if you sold an MP3 on iTunes, for example, you're getting a good chunk of that. But when somebody streams your songs, you're not getting paid very much. But I don't think necessarily it's unfair. Like people are paying like $10 to $15 a month for a monthly subscription, and how many songs do I listen to that month, right? And if you divide 10 or 15 by the number of songs, and Spotify or whoever's administering it obviously should get a cut of that, and they need a cut of that in order to survive and to keep providing the service. I mean, you can see really quickly why, mathematically, it's going to be a fraction of a cent. And if you're going to expect people to pay more than $10 to $15 a month, there is a threshold. There is a maximum of what people will pay. Right. So kind of the math is what it is.
So the subscription folks are hedging that we aren't going to listen to as many songs as the pennies it takes to pay for the songs we listen to.
I don't know all of the details about how that works exactly, but I believe that the amount of royalties they pay out is related to the plays and is related to the person that plays what they're paying for. And I don't think it's a one-to-one relation because obviously Spotify, who I don't even think are profitable yet, but they need to take money in order to run their business out of that cut of the subscription fees, as well as the advertising revenue for the free streaming people. But yeah, it's going to be the free streams. I know Spotify pays less for the free streams, but they still pay because they, from the ad revenue, I guess. But I'm pretty sure it's related to what the listeners are paying.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
And it's kind of the Wild West. I'm pretty sure that's how Spotify does it. Apple Music pays higher royalties. And so they do it their way. And there's a thing called Deezer. That's more in France and Europe. They do it differently or may have negotiated different deals or whatever. So all these different streaming services are not going to be the same as Spotify. Spotify is just the biggest one.
I don't know if now is the right time to ask this question, but we talked sort of about estates, and that Prince's estate apparently assumed the songwriting rights from Prince after he passed away. Did these songwriting rights ever run out? Can I play a Bach song without paying songwriter royalties to someone? I think I've heard of Creative Commons, or at some point the copyright runs out. I've heard people say that before. Is that correct?
You have to pay Bach's great grandson or grandnephew, whoever's left living in charge of the estate. Yeah, no, you're right. Of course, they do run out. There's a time limit. I don't know off the top of my head what it is. I think it's 50 years after the person dies that songs end up in the public domain.
Public domain, that's it. Okay.
And so, but what that means is there's no songwriter royalty paid for that song after they're in the public domain. So I just released this really weird recording of Handel's Messiah, from part 1 of Handel's Messiah. That's all in the public domain. So I'm not getting any royalties, any songwriting royalties, because I didn't write those songs. But Handel and his descendants are also not getting any royalties for that. The only royalties that are being paid then are royalties that are payable for the owner of the sound recording, which is me, and for the person that performed on them, which is me and a few other people. But I'm taking all those.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about if you look up performance, what did I call them? What did I call SOCAN? Performance rights organizations in Canada. There are a bunch of them. And so it's quite confusing. I want to touch on that a little bit. And part of the way I'm going to do that is by talking about those other people, those other roles that have bundles of rights. So the performer copyrights, the person that performs part of a sound recording is the performer. So if you play the tambourine, if you play the cowbell on Don't Fear the Reaper, then you are a performer on that recording. And so there's rights associated with that. Now, this is where it's not the case that everyone that's playing something on a recording has a performer right, because usually they sign it away, right? So if you're a session musician, you're getting paid for that session. So instead of getting this ongoing right to receive royalties, you're getting cash up front. You don't care how the song does. That's your gig. You're getting paid. You play on it. You no longer own that performance. Whoever paid you owns that performance. But that right still exists. So somebody owns it. And so they get public performance royalties as well, just like the songwriter. So when the recording is played live, the songwriter will get, or played in public, sorry, the songwriter will get a public performance royalty, and the performers who still own that right to their performance, or whoever owns the rights to the performance, gets royalties as well. So the songwriter ones, that's done through SOCAN. SOCAN collects them. But for the performers, it's administered by RE/Sound, RE:sound. They're another performance right organization.
Okay.
Those are also set out by the Copyright Act. Those, the tariffs, they call them tariffs in the Act. Yeah, so obviously that's just for the recording. Somebody does a cover of the song. It doesn't matter if they're copying your performance that you did on the recording. Only the songwriter gets royalties for that kind of a public performance.
Right.
The performer only gets royalties anytime their performance is actually played publicly. They also get making available rights too, so for streaming.
Okay.
And no change, like exactly the same way as a songwriter, how it's like unregulated in kind of the Wild West, it's the same thing. Now, the last one is the sound recording rights. So the person that owns the recording, which traditionally would be the record label. They put up the money for it. They own the recording, and they get to collect all the money whenever that recording is used. And so you get public performance rights. So, and those again are also collected by RE/Sound. So whenever a recording is played publicly, theoretically 3 different tariffs are paid, or 3 different royalties are paid: the songwriter, the performers, and the owner of the song, the owner of the recording. The owner of the recording also gets mechanical royalties. So anytime that it's reproduced on a CD or vinyl or MP3, they get that. And those are administered by Connect. All caps, CONNECT. They collect mechanical royalties for the owner of the sound recording. So performers don't get a mechanical royalty, only the songwriter and the owner of the recording. And then making available rights as well are paid to the owner of the recording.
Okay.
Now, I just want to say something about RE/Sound. So RE/Sound has member organizations that work with them. And this makes things confusing. There's a bunch of them. And including Connect, I just mentioned Connect. They're a member organization of RE/Sound.
Okay.
There's also ACTRA. ACTRA RAX, which is, I think is ACTRA is the English acronym and RAX is the French acronym. I could be wrong though. And then the MROC, I think is a French one, and Artistal. Those are all organizations that can administer royalties for performers. I don't know why. I don't know why there are 1, 2, 3 organizations within Resound, who's another organization that can do it directly, that all administer rights for performers. I don't have an answer for you. I think it's ludicrous and it makes it super confusing.
I'm having such a difficult time imagining the bureaucracy that goes on behind the scenes to administer all of this. Like, do we have towers of people that are working in administration of music royalties? I don't know anybody who works in this area or who's ever worked in this area, but it must be massive to be tracking all of this. And I'm just,
they've got it down.
I'm a little just in awe.
I don't think they're perfect at, like, they don't capture everything, of course.
Oh, certainly not. Yeah,
right. There's people that break the law all the time. Like anytime you like use your Spotify account to play music in public, you're what you get for paying your good. What you get for your Spotify membership is a right for personal use. You do not have the right to play that in public. And if you do that, technically you'd be triggering, the law says you have to pay these royalties.
Yeah.
But you don't pay them for doing it. So it's like you're getting away with it, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So like if you own a business and you just have your Spotify or like your YouTube going on in the background, you're breaking the law. If you get caught, you probably get some hefty fines. There's a right way to do it, which is you register with Resound and SOCAN, and you pay, you buy some membership where you're paying X amount every month in order to legally play the music that you're going to play at your place of business or whatever. Yeah. And FYI, as a side note, another service that Resound and its member organizations provide is collecting private copying royalties. Now, you both may remember this. People were losing their minds. Well, not people. We were pumped about it, but like the record industry was losing their minds when CDRs became a thing. The ability to write your own CDs, because tape-to-tape dubbing was happening a lot, and people just kind of winked at it. They didn't really care. It's like, yeah. It's like you shouldn't be doing it because you can't reproduce sound recordings. That's engaging the mechanical royalty without paying the mechanical royalty, because now you're like reproducing it onto another mechanical medium, and you didn't pay the mechanical royalty. And so that's why there's this issue of like tape-to-tape high-speed dubbing. But it was like,
I was pretty good at that in junior high. Go to the library. Yeah.
Making some mixtapes. And like they cared, but they didn't care that much because tape to tape dubbing, you lose quality every single time because tapes have a high noise floor. It's like the base level of noise is high on a tape. You get tape hiss. And so every time
the DJ was always talking over the songs and ruining them. And
well, if you're doing it from a radio, then it's even worse because radios use all these compressions. So the song, like they like squish everything and make it louder for broadcast. So you're getting into like, the quality is dropping. So, but when it became possible to do CDR, you're getting a perfect digital copy of the song. Right. And so then they were like, this is the downfall of the music industry. It's going to destroy us. And so what they did to get around that was if you buy a CDR still to this day in Canada, part of the price that you're paying for that CDR is this private copying royalty. That's how they capture that.
Interesting.
So then they're just like, people are going to do it. So, so SOCAN, Simra, and Sodrak or the Society for Reproduction Rights of Authors, Composers, and Editors of Canada administer those royalties for songwriters. But CDRs are more and more irrelevant. So, because why would you even buy a CDR at this point? Because it's a very niche market. Because if you need writable media, you're probably getting a Blu-ray, a blank Blu-ray. And you're storing data on it. You're not worried about, or like people are certainly pirating movies and using Blu-rays to do that, but not CDRs are kind of useless these days. So let me kind of summarize, because we talked about a lot of stuff, and I want to and one of my goals was to make this not confusing. And I know the way we've meandered about it has been interesting. I hope you found it engaging, but you may not have a clear picture of everything that we talked about. So I just want to kind of back up, zoom out a little bit, and provide kind of a high level summary. So basically there's three bundles of rights: the songwriter bundle, the performer on a sound recording bundle, and the owner of a sound recording bundle. Songwriter gets most of the opportunity to get paid for one given song, I should say, because they get paid anytime that song is performed publicly, whether it's their recording or somebody else's recording, or somebody's doing a cover, somebody's playing it live, they get a royalty. They get mechanical royalties anytime it's reproduced on a physical medium. They get sync licensing, which is negotiated kind of one-off anytime it's synchronized with video. And they get make available rights for streaming on Spotify and other like services. The performer bundle of rights only exists when that sound recording that they performed on is used, and it can be used for public performance. So if it's played live in public or played in public, the recording, they would be entitled to a royalty, and making available rights as well when it's streamed. That's the only two ways a performer on a sound recording gets paid. They don't get paid for sync licensing. And then the owner of the sound recording, again, they get public performance rights. Anytime that sound recording is played in public, they get royalties. They get mechanical royalties anytime that sound recording is manufactured, put on a physical medium, or made available in an MP3. And they get making available rights anytime that song is streamed on Spotify or like services. And so how do they all get paid for all these things? Some of those royalties are governed by legislation. And there are performance rights organizations that collect those royalties on their behalf. SOCAN for songwriters, and Resound for performers, and for owners of the sound recording. And that's about it. There's a whole bunch of other organizations that deal with performers for some reason. They're all members of Resound. I don't know why. And SOCAN, as well as some Resounds, and Resound and SODRAC all collect royalties on CDRs. So was that succinct-ish, zoomed out summary, a little easier to understand?
Yeah, I think it was. I guess I'm just, I'm really, taken aback by the complexity of all this stuff that goes on behind the scenes of Spotify and being an artist, or a musician specifically. And I guess, to your point early on in the episode, when you talked about the Beatles, and that was, decades ago in a really different technological, landscape. But it seems that there's this could be ripe with traps for the unwary as well. If it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for an artist to get exploited. If they weren't careful or weren't getting the right advice.
And there's a history of exploited artists, right?
Well, but Prince, obviously, there was that whole thing about him getting out of his contract. I'm sure that had to do with royalties and all sorts of stuff, right? I don't really remember the details, but
yeah, well, and Taylor Swift, not that I feel sorry for her, but she didn't like her deal with her original publisher or whatever, or the owner of her sound recordings, not publisher, the owner of her earlier sound recordings. So she re-recorded all her albums. That's why she re-recorded all her albums.
Well, I was going to ask that too. Like, has there ever been an instance where someone has retained a performer right or something for a recording, and the songwriter says, okay, I'm just going to record it then without that drummer and shop that version around. I guess there is. That's an example there.
Yeah, T Swizzle did it not for that reason, because I bet you any of the musicians on there were session musicians.
Yeah.
Or the record label owned the sound recording, and I don't know what the dispute was exactly about. Maybe she didn't like her contract with them or whatever. But they did not have, I guess they didn't have a clause about being exclusive, or maybe they did, but there was a time limit because usually in recording contracts, there'll be like a time, like you can't re-record the song.
Oh, right.
Within
to avoid
X
that.
years. Yeah.
Right.
And so maybe that time limit ran up or her contract ran out. Like, I don't know. But clearly she wanted to have a different sound recording out there of those songs so that she could collect those royalties as well. Yeah, artists have been exploited. The ones that aren't exploited are notable for not being exploited. Like Tom Petty is a good example of someone who like negotiated hard and got a fair deal. And U2 is also a notable exception. Their management really looked out for them and made sure that they got a fair deal, and so they got tons of money. And the Beatles are a good example of somebody who got totally screwed by management and whatever. And it started like the whole thing. The music industry is like based on lies, deception, and crime. So like, are you aware of like this scandal of the pay to play scandal? And it's not like one thing, it's just like this ongoing thing. So radio stations were in the pocket of mobsters who owned record labels, like legitimate gangsters laundering money through record labels would pay radio stations to play their artists, which of course would fuel album sales, which would bring the money in. 100% like crime syndicate stuff. Okay.
Right.
And then in the United States, this finally came to the attention of the government. They cracked down, they made these rules, and they just found ways to get around the rules. And now with Spotify, even it's happening too. And so there's like playlist curators and pay to get on those playlists. It's like the same kind of thing. It's not the music industry, surprise, surprise, is not merit-based. You're not hearing spins of songs on the radio because that's what you want to hear. It's because somebody's paying somebody to get that on the radio.
Yeah. Well, that sadly, maybe it displays some cynicism on my part, but that doesn't surprise me as much as the bureaucracy and just all of the contracts and everything that must underlie all of this stuff just kind of boggles my mind. I just like close my eyes and imagine this spider web of rights and stuff flowing all over the place.
I guess one thing I want to say, like, I hope it doesn't sound too cynical for people out there who are like writing songs and have dreams of having success, because I definitely, as a musician, I would never want to crush somebody's dream about that. And I would say, I think now is an exciting time to be a content creator, whatever kind of content you're creating, whatever kind of art you're creating. I think it's a really exciting time, because while there's always going to be this element of, the man and evil conniving people keeping the good man down, there's still, I think, if you are dedicated and it's something that you want to do, there are tools out there for, anybody to have success and get their music heard. And there's a website called Indiepreneur, who that is their raison d'etre, is providing resources to independent artists to sell their own albums and tour if that's what they want to do, and marketing and how to market yourself. And like, they have like really awesome courses that they sell that kind of provide playbooks and like walk you through step by step of how to do that type of thing. And they're just one example of a good resource that's out there, made by musicians, for musicians, people that are using their own product and having some measure of success. And it doesn't mean that like success as a musician in today's world is not only selling 1 million albums. Like, you can actually make decent money as a small business. And there's ways to do that. You're basically a small e-commerce business, and you can make money selling your stuff, having merch and selling it. And like, but you have to, you have to become a business person. You have to realize you're running a business. But I think it's an exciting time, and I think it's possible to do it, and possible to have a small piece of the pie that will enable you to do what you love doing, and make a reasonable income from doing it. If you're smart about it and you have the time and to invest in it, and you're passionate about it. I think it's, those weren't enough in the past. Time and passion were not necessarily enough, but I think today they really can get you into, having some measure of success.
The internet's a great equalizer in a lot of ways, isn't it? And I think consumers also are a lot more aware of some of this stuff too, right? Like, I think probably when the mobsters were dictating what was played on the radio, those were different times. And I think people see like Tay-Tay getting in a fight with Ticketmaster, and like Pearl Jam's, backlash against that beast. We mentioned Prince. Like, I think there's a lot of recognition of what's going on too, and people want to support bands directly and musicians and artists directly. So get out there and support a local musician.
I heard another podcast.
Play the intro a few times to this to this podcast, and throw Evan a few pennies.
Another podcast I listened to mentioned a cool hack for making sure money gets into independent artists' pockets. It's a Meat Eater podcast. Interestingly enough, I don't know why they were talking about this, but he said what he does. This guy, one of the guests on the podcast, he said what he does is he'll go to like the band, if like there's a local band playing, and he'd be like, hey, just put me on the guest list, and I'll buy some merch. I'll buy, what do you want me to buy? I'll buy like a t-shirt and a CD or whatever. And because the idea being that's going directly into their pocket, whereas they're going to lose part of the door.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. So, that's one way you can support your local band and get more value for your money, because you get to see the show and you get the merch. There you go.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of talking. I hope it was interesting.
It definitely was. Yeah.
I hope it wasn't too confusing. I hope people followed us all the way down the garden path to the end to get kind of a more succinct overview. Because like I said, I got to look it up every time. It's confusing.
Yeah, it's definitely confusing, but I think you explained it well. And I feel like there's a few other things that we can maybe get into here a little bit too. So interesting stuff.
Keep me in mind. I'm happy to come back anytime, Heather.
All right, great. Well, maybe next week. All right. Well, thanks. I guess we're going to say bye from us here at Access to Justice. We'll see you next time.
Bye, and enjoy that outro.
Any information in this video is general information only and is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. Watching this video does not create a lawyer-client relationship. You should always seek the advice of a lawyer or other qualified professional for advice regarding your individual situation. While we take care to ensure that the information contained in this video is accurate and up to date, we make no warranties or representations as to the suitability, completeness, or accuracy of the information contained in this video. Any reliance you place on the information is at your own risk. Kahane Law Office, Merrick Law, Heather Malarick Professional Corporation, Evan Clark Professional Corporation, Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, and any guests will not be responsible nor liable in any way for any content, including but not limited to any errors or omissions in the content, or for any loss or damage of any kind occurred as a result of any content communicated in this video, whether by Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, or by a third party. Kim McDonald is a financial advisor with Raymond James Limited. Information provided is not a solicitation, and although obtained from sources considered reliable, is not guaranteed. The view and opinions contained in this media are those of Kim McDonald, not Raymond James Limited. Securities-related products and services are offered through Raymond James Limited, member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James advisors are not tax advisors, and we recommend that clients seek independent advice from a professional advisor on tax-related matters. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, RJFP, a subsidiary of Raymond James Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. When providing life insurance products, financial advisors are acting as insurance representatives of RJFP.
Darkness of the dales dissipates, declines because of he who